Welcome to Love What You Love. I'm Julie Rose. I'm insatiably curious about people in the world around us and absolutely in love with passion and unselfconscious enthusiasm. Every other week, I geek out with someone about the thing that they love, and then I share it with you. Welcome back, or welcome. Before we get started, just a quick thank you to everyone who's purchased Love What You Love merch. The logo is so amazing, thanks to Jonas Ramirez, who's also known as My Fancy Fox on Instagram. And that logo's on some pretty cool stuff, I have to admit. So check out the goods at society6.com/lovewhatyoulovepod. And that's society with a 6, number 6. And let me know what you think. The proceeds from all of the sales are donated to a nonprofit, and the latest round went to one of my very favorites, World Central Kitchen. Okay, with that out of the way, let's meet this week's guest. Kim Landmark loves traveling around and getting to know her native California, but definitely not like a regular tourist. An urban explorer, Kim loves to visit off-the-beaten-path, really unusual places, especially abandoned buildings. In this conversation, we talk creepy abandoned hospitals, ghost hunting, forgotten histories, freaky Google Maps experiences, a 30-year-old murder mystery, and so much more. So find out why Kim loves urban exploration, and why you might learn to love it too. Hello, Kim. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Julie. Hello. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk with you because you do something that's so interesting to me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes.
I'm excited.
So you explore abandoned buildings.
Yes. So they call it, there's a term for it. They go by urban exploration. So I'm an urban explorer. So yeah, I like to explore abandoned places or really old historic places.
What is like the definition of urban exploration?
Pretty much I think it's pretty much covers anything out of the ordinary that people like to explore that kind of most people think might be weird or creepy or things that just aren't the normal place to go out of your way to go visit or go inside of these weird, creepy places. So people call them.
Got it. And so what draws you to doing this? Is it the creepy factor, or what's interesting for you?
Honestly, it started for me with photography. I found it captures really well on camera. I was into photography for a while, and also really into history and old buildings and stuff like that. I've always been into it. So kind of just driving around and always seeing these random decaying buildings and stuff for some reason was always really intriguing to me. And I just started taking pictures of it, and I realized that people were kind of interested in it too, and I didn't know that. So I was like, I'm going to start sharing this with people and see the feedback I get. And surprisingly, a lot of people are into it. So it's kind of fun to share this odd thing.
No, it's cool. It's cool. So how do you choose where to go? And then what is a day like when you go out and do some urban exploring?
It's kind of random for me. Sometimes it'll be literally I'm driving somewhere and I pass something that catches my eye. I've gotten really good at noticing little features that usually lead me to bigger things. Sometimes I'm driving and I'll see an old wall or an old driveway that looks like nobody has taken care of it in a while, and I'm like, oh, what's that? And I kind of drive down it, and I notice there's a whole abandoned house down this road, and stuff like that. But a lot of the time too, it's stuff that I see or have seen on the internet, like Instagram or something, that I notice is in my area. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'll save it, add it to a little list of places I want to explore. There's a website too that I use a lot, because I drive a lot and travel a lot around California. So there's this website, and it's called Atlas Obscura. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. Yeah. So I use that website a lot also to find more common places. But it leads me to a lot of really unique and fun places. And it's cool because you can use your current location and it'll tell you whatever's near you. So I find that really handy too. Whenever I'm taking a long drive, I'll kind of just check to see if there's anything interesting in the area or
Yeah. So no, what when you're like, hey, I drove down this driveway and there's this abandoned house and like what are you looking for when you're getting into this house?
honestly, nothing really specific. I kind of am just really intrigued to see. A lot of the time, I'm interested in like the old architecture inside, or like, how I have so many questions when I go in, like what happened here? Why is it abandoned? Who lived here before? All these things run through my head, and it's just so intriguing to me to just sometimes I'll be able to even find history of the places. Yeah, so I'll like Google search the address and I'll look back at like the real estate records, and I found some crazy stuff just from the internet from like looking it up, the addresses and stuff. So it's pretty cool. Like for me, I think it's more what happened and what is the history of the place that I'm always so intrigued by. I am also intrigued by like supernatural, so that does play a huge part in what I do too, because I have had a lot of kind of, I would say, ghost or supernatural experience, something like along those lines that I can't really explain. I've had some weird experiences, so I feel like that always is in the back of my mind, like, oh, is this haunted? Is this place haunted? Like I always think that because sometimes things happen that you can't explain, and it's pretty cool to see. Even if nothing creepy happens, you might get a vibe or something, and then you never know what could have happened there in the past or what is lingering.
How long have you been doing this?
Doing it for a long time. I would say online sharing it probably about like 3 years now, but it took me a while to finally start sharing it because I didn't really think about it until I realized how popular this kind of stuff was on Instagram. I was like, you know what? I have so many pictures in my library like saved because yeah, I've been doing it for probably like 5 years, even before that though, just like subconsciously almost, just like always been into it.
Now, were you like adventurous as a little kid?
I was. My parents also were very adventurous. We were
Mm.
always camping and doing things outdoors. And I think that kind of also led to this. When I was a kid, we lived on this ranch. It was like this guy's property, and we lived there. And my dad took care of the property in exchange for us to live there. And on the property, there was like an old homestead that was like really, really old, probably like almost 100 years old. And that has burned down now, but back then I remember like being there kind of like very vaguely because I was so young. But yeah, I see pictures of it. So I know even as a kid, like I was kind of around stuff like this. And recently me and my sister went back to that property. That's when we saw the house had burned down, but there's even like a rusted car still there, like really old car. Yeah, it's pretty neat. So I guess it's always been around me since I was younger too. So
Are you generally kind of a curious person?
yeah, I definitely am. Yeah, I definitely am pretty curious. And again, very intrigued by like the past, I guess. So, yeah, I am pretty curious, definitely.
Let's say you choose a place to go, choose it ahead of time rather than it being kind of spontaneous. What goes into your planning? Do you just kind of say, I'm going to go to this place and just see what happens?
Yeah, usually I'll see if I have like a friend. I don't like to go alone most of
Mm.
the time. Sometimes I do, but most of the time I'll have my sister with me. So we'll try to plan it out, look it up online and see details of how to get there because that's important too. If someone has been there, has recommended it, I ask them like, hey, how was it? Was it easy to access? Is there sometimes, we don't ever, if it's really blocked out, we're not going to go out of our way. We don't, to go in any place. It's usually like open and we can get right to it. It's not like we're, breaking into these places necessarily. I mean, kind of, but yeah, it's never like cutting fences or anything like that. So we make sure that it's accessible before we go super out of our way to access something. And yeah, just see like what recommendations people have that have been there and if they have any weird stories and stuff like that or any experiences. Sometimes I will YouTube it also because people post videos a lot, of them going to these places too. So that is really helpful also.
So, what kind of things do you find in these abandoned places?
Sometimes nothing at all. Sometimes, we've gotten lucky and found some pretty cool, like old books. Like there's this one book that I found in an old abandoned like mining town. And it was just like literally hundreds of books just like scattered in this like old barn, just on the floor, dirty. But one book stood out. It was called Hidden California.
Oh,
Yeah, and it was just perfect because it's like a book of, it's like a journal of a man who explored like all these random places in California. And yeah, it's just random that I found this book in the middle of all of these books. And it just lists like all these different really cool old historic places and towns and just little facts that he's learned along his way. And he pretty much just made it into a book and sold it. And yeah, it's kind of damaged, but it's still it's still legible and stuff. So it's pretty cool. I have it. I saved
oh,
that.
I
And
love
then
that.
yeah, it was really cool. One time I also found in like an old house, really, really old house. It was like a bunch of just like kind of rubbish, but this was something that I was like, this is so cool. It was like somebody's old crystal collection, just like stones.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that they had found, but they left it behind, I guess, because it seemed like maybe a long time ago, maybe their house burned down and they just took what they could, but they left a lot of like just random knickknacks and like arts and crafts stuff that they had in their garage. And but yeah, like half the building was burned down and stuff, and we just happened to be passing by. I was like, oh look, and we found this jar full of these old crystals. It was really neat just to see. Yeah,
Yeah. Have you found a place and then posted about it that nobody else has been to yet?
I have found, I mean, maybe not that nobody has
Yeah.
been to, but I have found some places, and I've had a lot of people reach out to me and really interested in the places that I've seen. Well, you know, I'm sure maybe someone else had been there before, but some of them seem like very rural, off the grid. And usually if it's stuff like that I feel is not as common that people go to, I don't usually share the location as much because I don't want it to get destroyed or vandalized and stuff like that. Like, I live in the Antelope Valley, and I recently actually found, I was like hiking a hill, and from the distance I could see in the distance what looked like it was like an old cabin or something. So me and my sister ended up going and like looking at it, and you could just tell it had not been vandalized. So that tells you that like many people probably haven't been there because most places are vandalized. So it's kind of cool to find little places that nobody's actually been to, but it's a little rare.
Are there different kinds of urban exploration? It sounds like you kind of focus on rural abandoned places. Do other folks kind of focus on other types of abandoned places?
Yeah, definitely. I would say anything under the category of like unique or quirky or different would be considered kind of urban exploration. Like if you like to go and explore people's weird, you know, some people build like art exhibits like in their backyard or something, you know, where they just have like a bottle castle or something weird, you know. That would also kind of fall into the same category because it's different, a unique form of art or something like that. I think it could also be considered a little urban exploration too.
So you focus on California. Are there particular parts of California that have more stuff that you find interesting than others?
I mean, I would love to explore more of California. Honestly, I explore mainly California because that's just where I'm at, and I always find places near me. But usually I'm in like Southern California, so honestly, a lot of the places that I find are in like the Mojave Desert,
Mm.
along Route 66. There's a bunch of really cool places. And there's some like Santa Monica area also, like in the mountains down there, and but yeah, I would say most of the places I find are in Southern California, but also, you know, I'm sure there's so much more. I just haven't extended that far north yet. I would love to get up there more soon, definitely though.
Have you ever had an experience, going into any of these abandoned buildings that was like sketchy or like even dangerous?
I mean, not necessarily. Luckily, we haven't. I always do consider that, and people always tell me like, "Be careful, you're crazy." I am trying, you know, usually pretty careful, and I try to like look out and be very aware everywhere I go. I also carry like a little pocket knife with me just in case, and just to be safe. But I haven't really ever experience anything super sketchy. Usually, if I do see somebody in a building or something, it's usually most of the time a younger kid or a group of kids. Like, I was in an old abandoned hospital in Victorville with my sister, and we could hear them, but they were like playing hide and go seek. So it was like, okay, they're good. Like, But they scared us at first because we just see people running down the halls.
Right.
I'm like, ah. But then we realized it was like some teenagers, and we're just like, ah, whatever.
What kind of vibe did you get off of the hospital?
That place was definitely really weird. It's actually, I found it through this group of guys. They have a YouTube channel, and they post all these weird places, and they're also in Southern California. So I saw one of their videos, and it was them in the hospital, and they actually caught footage of like something weird in the
Ooh.
background. Yeah, so that's what I first saw, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is right in my neighborhood, pretty much. And I told my sister, and yeah, it was really creepy though. So they actually caught something. They caught a few things. They even caught like, because they're ghost hunters. So they have like all the equipment that they need and stuff. And they caught voices. Like they caught a slight voice of a woman saying, like whispering that she's like, I hate it here. But she's saying, I hate it here.
Oh, I just
But it
got
was just like a
chills.
whisper. Yeah, it was really creepy in that they caught that. And then they also caught something moving in the background of one of their videos, and the way it moves is just like almost flowing across the screen, and it's just really, really weird. And they didn't even notice it at first. So
Oh my God. So you didn't see anything there, but you kind of felt that vibe while you were there.
I felt weird vibes for sure. The first time I went there, I was actually alone, so I didn't go very far in. But I had just been in the areas. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go in. I'm just gonna like go in and just see like just a little bit of it. It's not just a hospital. It's like a whole old military base. So there's a hospital, there's old buildings, and like all this different stuff. And so most of the time I was driving through it, but I did stop at the hospital, and I stepped foot in the hospital, and it was weird. I was like, okay, yeah, I shouldn't be here alone. Like, let me get out of here. So I was there for like 10 minutes and I left. Yeah, definitely weird vibes. Lots of weird vibes.
Yeah, oh my God, I can imagine. In terms of weird vibes, are abandoned hospitals kind of at the top of the list, or like old cabins out in the Mojave? Like, where do you get the creepiest vibes?
I would say so far, I would definitely say probably in that hospital. Yeah, it was off. It was weird, but sometimes sometimes I get weird vibes in places that aren't even that, you wouldn't think were that creepy. So it just depends. At the hospital, I think you could just feel it was like some weird lingering energy in there.
Now, have you been on a property where somebody like in the living world who says you shouldn't be here?
You mean like literally said that to me? No, I have not. No, luckily that hasn't happened either. For my sister, I wasn't actually there for this experience, but my sister was with her friend, and they were trying to go into the old casino resort somewhere in Palm Springs, and the security guard went up to them and kicked them out, but hasn't happened to me yet.
So, is there a type of place or an actual place that you would just never go to, even with somebody with you?
I wouldn't go to, I guess, just somewhere that like is patrolled, I guess, like super heavily. I wouldn't want to get in any trouble or anything like that. So anything like that, I would definitely not go into. Things that are like trying extra hard to keep you out. That's about it, really. Other than that, I'm kind of intrigued by most things, and weird things like intrigue me, and creepy places intrigue me. So I'm not scared necessarily. It's more about getting in trouble or not.
Now, do you have any health concerns when you go into these places? Like, do you wear a mask or gloves?
Yeah, so I usually wear a mask, depending where I am, but most of the time I do wear a mask because of, mold and whatever other toxic things could be in the air, like in the hospital and stuff like that, the old buildings. I definitely try to always wear a mask. Gloves if necessary, but most of the time I'm not really touching anything.
Is there like kind of an unwritten code among urban explorers, or like just go look at it, don't touch it, don't move anything?
I mean, I would hope, that people for the most part are like respecting the place, because it's cool, like to be able to go back and see things that I saw, like the people's old art or something, like I thought it was cool. So I would like to leave it behind so someone else can see it, so stuff like that. I think I would like to think people like kind of leave, but a lot of the times they don't. But yeah, for the most part that, and just to not vandalize things. I feel like it's always like the younger kids are just sometimes just stupid teenagers and stuff like that end up vandalizing stuff. And it just makes it not as cool, I guess, if, all the windows are broken out but it happens.
So, I mean, you've been doing it for many years now. Was there a moment or a particular place where you're like, oh, yep, I love doing this. This is so cool?
Yeah, actually, I would say something that really piqued my interest in seeing more places is this spot in Santa Monica. It's called Murphy's Ranch. And it's like down deep in the Santa Monica Mountains. And the story goes, I'm not sure, how true it is or not, but the story goes that it was built by Nazi followers or like Hitler, like people that were like following Hitler at the time. Yeah, really weird. Uh, they built like this whole compound down there with like, there's garden beds. So they had a garden, they had water tank, they had power, they had just everything. And their idea was they were building this place down there where no one really knew about it. And after the war in Germany, supposedly they were building this place so that Hitler could hide there until things calmed down, and then he could come out of hiding and be the savior to America. That was what they thought.
Oh.
That's what the story is. Yeah, so weird. So that never happened, obviously. I guess it was raided before they could even really do much there, and then it was sold and later burned. But now it's just like ruins. But it's really interesting because the way they built it, you could tell it was like something weird. It just has like all these stairs, so it's like 500 or something stairs to get down to the bottom. But like there's so many staircases because I guess they had people patrolling the staircases that go up the mountain just to see like get an overview of the property, make sure like things were safe or whatever they were doing. But yeah, so it's just like surrounded by all these staircases, and it was just really, really weird, but also really intriguing to see. Like, so it kind of started there. It made me wonder, like, hey, what else is there over here? And it kind of led to more doors.
When you're doing your urban explorations, what's the worst thing about it? Is it just like, oh, I love everything about it except for this?
It would probably be like knowing that it's probably the like mold and stuff in the air that I'm breathing. That's probably the worst for me because I'm like, I don't really like walking around the mask, but I'm like, okay, for my health, I should probably wear this. But I think that's probably like the worst. And also, I guess there is like a risk of there being homeless. Not that I'm scared of homeless people in general, but I mean, just someone being in there, other than me, like an adult and creepy, like older, I don't know, just something like just lingering, like someone bigger than me, like, I don't know. And there's always that fear of just like somebody bigger than me creeping around, watching me or something, I always try to consider that and just try to be safe and always on my toes, definitely.
Do you have a favorite story from one of the explorations that you've done that you learned more about afterwards?
Yeah, I do. Actually, it was recent. That one sticks out to me when you ask. I was in Ventura County, and me and my sister were supposed to meet with this group of people to kind of explore because I had recently been out there and they saw the places that I had seen, and they were like, oh, that's super cool. I want to check it out. We should plan to go. And it didn't end up working out, but me and my sister were like, oh, let's just go out there anyways. And we were we were having lunch and just kind of looking at Google Earth image and kind of just looking over the whole area. And randomly I saw this. It's almost like my phone led me to this house. I don't know. It was so random because I swear I like look away and then I look back at my phone and this place just like was like zoomed in on. And I was like, wait, that's weird. Like, and you could tell kind of from the aerial image that it was like kind of run down and the grass was growing in the driveway. And it just looked like it could be possibly abandoned. And it was right near where we were, pretty close. So I was like, oh, let's drive by. It looked like a huge mansion, like colonial style mansion, but it looked abandoned. So we drove by and it was really cool. It was a gorgeous old house. It seemed like maybe someone had just bought it because like there was a construction gate around it, and they looked like they had just maybe installed new windows, and there was no way of getting into the house at the time. But I looked up the address on Redfin and I saw that it had been abandoned for 30 years and that someone had just bought it literally like last year or 2 years ago. But yeah, it was abandoned for 30 years. And I was like, that's weird. Like, gorgeous house. The property was, I think, on like 124 acres or something like that. There was an old riverbed, which I think is probably only dried up because of the drought, but like an old riverbed running that right next to it. and like, oh, just huge property. So I was really like confused why it would be abandoned for 30 years. And then I started doing research on it, and I found this document. A woman who had bought it was trying to register the house as a historic place. And she wrote like a whole maybe 10 pages about the history dating all the way back to like the native tribe that was there before the house was built. I mean, she had history that was just so extensive, and I just thought it was so interesting to learn all of that. But it goes back to 30 years ago, when the history that happened there was, I guess, someone broke into the house, and there was a man living there by himself. He was he had a double prosthetic, I believe, or double amputee, should I say, and he was also deaf. But someone broke into his house when he was sleeping, so he didn't have his prosthetics on, and he was deaf, so he didn't really hear the person come in. And it happened to be that he was murdered. Like, yeah, murdered him. The guy murdered him, like, with a table leg that he had found in the barn.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's so crazy, creepy, and sad. But yeah, so it turns out that he was murdered in this house 30 years ago, and it was a small neighborhood, kind of like, it's Ventura County. I want to say it's Ojai, a really beautiful area, and it's just so weird to me that it was just not like abandoned for 30 years. It's such a beautiful house. So yeah, it ends up somebody was murdered there, bludgeoned by a table leg.
My God.
And yeah, crazy. And so his nephew ended up living in the house for 6 years after his uncle was murdered. And I guess they moved out and they put the house up for sale. Doesn't say why they moved out or if they were having any weird experiences, but yeah, they put the house up for sale. And after that, it was like on the market, off the market, just for 30 years. And I realized that when they first put it up for sale, it was like a $2 million house. And then after 30 years of no selling it, they put it up for $1 million. So they cut the price in half, and somebody bought it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if they knew the story.
Yeah, something. They had to have.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And that's just one
Yeah.
story of like what all these places represent.
Yeah.
They all have a story.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That is so interesting. So
Right. Yeah.
how do your folks and loved ones feel about you and your sister doing this?
I mean, they think, just be safe. A lot of the time I'll get messages like, wait, are you by yourself? What are you doing? Are you crazy? But I try to be as safe as I can and as aware as I can. And I don't usually go by myself if I feel like it's super sketchy, or if I'm planning on going inside somewhere, I'm not going to go usually by myself, and just try to be safe. But yeah, so I mean, my family, they're not hugely fond of it, but they do see the interest and stuff that I'm building on Instagram, and the networking and the connections that I've been making with these different, ghost hunters, and with like you, for instance, and stuff like that. So they think it's really cool. I think now that they see this side of it,
Like, oh, okay, all right.
that's cool. I guess you're not the only one that's interested in this kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah. So do you have like a favorite photograph that you've captured in all of your exploration so far?
That's a hard one. Yeah, that's a hard one. I probably do. I would say probably from this recent trip that I took to Ventura County. Like, there's so many neat places there, but there's this one old, I want to say it's a warehouse, that it was like made with like some type of sheet metal or something, but most of the ceiling's kind of missing, so the light was like shining through so nicely, and it just makes a really cool picture.
What are some of the challenges of shooting in that kind of environment?
Definitely lighting. A lot of the times it's dark. Like, sometimes we'll have, recently with me and my sister, and my cousin came with us too, and it was so dark in this house, but there was this one room that looks like, I'm guessing somebody had set it up to do a photo shoot in there, because it looked like extra super creepy. Like, I mean, there was like fake blood splattered everywhere.
Oh.
And just like, I'm hoping it was fake. I think it was fake. It didn't look real. But yeah, it was just like really weird. And I was like, we have to get a picture in here. But it was like a really dark room. So I had them both like shining flashlights in order to like capture the picture. So yeah, it can be challenging sometimes.
What would you say is the best part of urban exploration for you? Like, what's the part that you just love the most?
I would say it's probably like when I get to learn the history of a place, it just like connecting dots for me is like exciting. I see this place and if I get to explore it and I think it's awesome, but I can't find any history about it, it just drives me crazy. I'm like, I want to know what happened here. So I would say it's really rewarding when I can find all the history or like really see like pictures from the internet. The internet is an awesome resource too, because a lot of the times I can find pictures of the past owners and like the people that lived there. And I think that's really cool. So
every house has a story, every building has a story, and
right.
you're like helping, even if one person is just looking it up and learning about it, it helps it from being forgotten.
Totally. That's a good way to put it. And a lot of the time I notice like other people, might be curious too. And what happened there? So it's nice. Like, I feel like kind of I've created like a resource for people too that they can go look. And usually most of the time, if I can find the history on the place, I will list the history in the captions of my pictures. So a lot of the time I feel like that's also really cool and rewarding because people are like, hey, that's awesome that you were able to help me learn about it too, not just like a picture.
Just kind of to wrap up here. So if someone who's listening wanted to get into urban exploration, what would you tell them? How to do it and what cautions you might provide?
I would say to definitely always be cautious about trespassing. That's one of the things that is the risk when you do this. Trespassing, you can get fined, you can get in trouble. So I don't recommend trespassing. A lot of the times that's what we do. But, it's so old and people aren't anywhere near paying attention to these places. Like nobody cares about, like it's forgotten places for the most part. So a lot of the time people don't care, but you need to be safe doing these things because there's still that risk of a cop pulling up and giving you a fine just to give you a fine just because he feels like it and you're doing something against the law. So there's always that risk. So definitely be really safe and wear a mask because you never know what toxins you could be breathing in and mold is not good for you. So that's the big one. And then, I would say if you can do research on the place before you go so you can get any tips from people. Follow me on Instagram. You can check out my tips.
Awesome. Well, Kim, thank you so much for taking so much time to chat with me about this. This was so interesting.
Thank you. I'm so glad we did this.
You can find Kim on Instagram at Callie_rediscovered and on TikTok at ThrillChicas. I'll include links to everything in the show notes, of course. I'll also include links to Kim's favorite nonprofit and mine too. Huge thanks to Kim for sharing her passion with us this week. Just a reminder that you can find this podcast on Instagram at LoveWhatYouLovePod, on Twitter at WhatYouLovePod, and the website is lovewhatyoulovepod.com. All of the transcripts for Love What You Love are available for everyone on the website, thanks to Emily White, transcription magician and proprietress of the Wordary. If you need transcripts, reach out to her at emilywhite@thewordary.com. The music for Love What You Love is called Inspiring Hope by Pink Sounds. A link to that artist is included in the show notes. As always, thank you so much for listening. Let's hang out again soon.
There's some good in this world, Mr. Fertile. And it's worth fighting for.